Today, I will be talking about this one thing that truly changed my life, that truly helped me cope, and better my marriage, my lifestyle, and just be more aware of myself. This impacted not just my life, but my kids' lives, and I think it'll continue to impact their children's lives. So, hi friends, my name is Jean Marie. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about generational curses and blessings. There's so many things you can unlock here. So a few years ago, I came across this influencer on Instagram. Her name is Lindsay. I'm gonna link it here. She had this session called Uncovered Grace. And I wasn't able to finish the whole 9 weeks or 7 weeks, however many that was. But I did go through her exercise on generational. I don't know if she called it curses and blessings, but that's how I remember it. The point is, we talk about genetics and things that are hereditary and like things that can be passed on from our parents to us, whether that's skin tone, height, or sickness, or diseases that can be carried over from one generation to another, or even personalities, right? But what we don't realize, and often, there are generational curses and blessings within our families that we just accept, or we just, it is what it is. I'm like this because my mom is like this. And I'm not talking about like medical conditions or physical attributes, but really more on how we act, how we speak, how we behave, how we handle things, how our relationships are. So what am I saying? A generational curse could be, for example, a bad marriage. It could be divorce. It could be infidelity. It could be, even if you're not divorced, it could just be like a horrible marriage where you're always fighting. And that could be passed on. You'll realize if you look around you, a lot of times, kids that come from divorced parents also end up being divorced themselves, or maybe if you trace back, their parents also came from a broken family themselves. And so my point is, these are types of generational curses that we need to identify. We need to acknowledge them so we can put a stop to them, right? Another example could be like abuse in a marriage, right? So if a husband is abusive to the wife, and children are able to witness this in their daily lives, where the father is very abusive to the mother and the mother is very timid and shy and does not fight back. If you're a daughter or a son witnessing this, growing up looking at this, it might result to you also being timid and not having a high self-esteem. You might not value yourself so much if you're like a daughter growing up in this. And you having that low self-esteem, bringing it into your own marriage, how does that affect your husband's reaction towards you or treatment towards you? How does that affect your children? Like, your lack of self-esteem will probably also result to your daughters having lack of self-esteem. Or it could bounce back to a totally different or the opposite result of them being too prideful, like as a way to compensate. So my point is, however things are at a certain generation, it affects the next generation a certain way. And we need to be able to identify, because sometimes we blame ourselves, right? Like, oh, I'm like this because I'm just like this. I'm so impatient. I don't, I'm a horrible person, blah, blah, blah. But then if you look back at your childhood, why are you like this? What happened that might have caused? And I'm not pointing fingers at our parents. They did their best, right? This is really more to understand why things are the way they are. Why are you like this? That way, once you understand that, you're going to start to open up to a solution of how can I change? Now that I know the reason why, what's my next step as to how to change that? For example, in my own example, in my life, I have always been hesitant to receive. Like, I have an issue with receiving either gifts or favors. I don't ask people favors as much as possible. I try to avoid asking people for favors. I feel very uncomfortable receiving gifts from people or free stuff. And I realized this was because growing up, my mom was a very, like, I don't know, it was not the easiest childhood. But one of the things that my mom would always tell me is that I was ungrateful. And so she would always emphasize how ungrateful I was. And I realized that resulted to me constantly telling myself at the back of my head, whenever she told me this, one day I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to need you anymore. One day I'm not going to need you to take care of me anymore. One day I will be able to do it on my own. And so because I was always told I was ungrateful, I was constantly thinking about that at the back of my head. And finally, obviously, I grew up. I'm on my own, right? I'm able to take care of myself. I'm able to take care of my own family. But I realized there was this fear of being told I'm ungrateful. There was this fear of like, oh, I don't want to receive anything from somebody because I might do something that might make them think I'm ungrateful after they gave me this. It's so sad. And I'm so conscious with how I am with my kids to never make them feel that way. Never make them feel like they owe me for taking care and giving them life. That's a different conversation, but that's something we should never make our kids feel, right? They're here on this earth because you brought them here. And it's literally your job to take care of them. And I understand they need to be grateful that they're given a good life, right? But it's not something we want to rub in their faces. But that's an example of how I grew up and how that kind of resulted in my adult life. And I only noticed and realized that because I was doing this exercise. She almost let us write as much as we know and even asked us to interview, like, this was like years ago, so I don't remember much. But she even asked us to interview relatives if we can and just recall, like, how was my grandma like? How was my grandpa like? What about my great grandfather? Do you have memories of him? Just interview like aunts and uncles and your parents on how, what personalities, what hobbies, what memories they have with as much ancestors you can trace back. And then that kind of, if somebody says, oh, your great grandpa was an alcoholic, or your great grandmother was so nice, she was so sweet, she was very motherly, she would, things like that, write them down. And then you can kind of trace it back to yourself. Oh, like, oh, my great grandma was like this. That's why my grandma was like this. And then that's why my dad is like this. And then you can kind of trace down and try your best to see what personalities or what things in your life connect to any of those. Identify the good ones, the blessings, right? And nurture that. And make sure you pass that along. Make sure that doesn't get cut off. And make sure your kids continue to receive that blessing, and that'll continue within generations. But most importantly, identify the curses. Like, what curses do you want to put a stop to? Make sure that you only pass on the good things to your kids. When I discovered this, it was like Pandora's box. I realized so many things about myself. Again, I don't want to point fingers like, oh, I'm like this because my mom's like this, my dad's like this. No. I realized so many things about myself and just be able to explain like, oh, this is why. And it's not my mom's fault. It's not my fault. That's just the result of certain things that I experience. And now that I understand that, I can kind of plan on how to change it. Because the idea of it just being a default, like that's just who you are, there's no changing that, is gone. There was a reason why you're like that. And so there's a way to change that, right? Because if you don't understand why you are a certain way, or why things are a certain way, then you're kind of stuck to the idea that that's just how it is. That's just gonna be how it is. It is how it is. Understanding why gives you a pathway as to how to change that. And I want to share a lot of other things and nuggets that have helped me in life, but I feel like this is really one of the big ones. And so I hope you found that helpful. My question to you is, now that you're thinking about it, let me know what ways or what things in your life do you think are you looking forward to changing or identifying why you're like that? Like, what are things that you want to change moving forward, you want to cut off and not pass along to your kids? I'm so curious. I had a lot of things when I was going through that exercise. I'm actually going to link her Instagram here. I don't know if she's still doing those sessions. I did this like 4 or 5 years ago. And honestly, that made me understand why I was this way. Why am I this kind of a wife? Why do I think this way? Why is my logic like this? Like, why am I so sensitive? So it was amazing, and it made me more conscious of how I am, because I realized it would affect how my children could be, even little things. So hopefully that was helpful. Curious to hear, what you find out about yourself. Let me know in the comments, and I hope to see you on the next video.